but the broader issue of the fact that often statute of limitations laws have been used to keep justice from happening. We've heard that over and over again from the survivor community, who are still dealing with the aftermaths of sexual abuse. And so there are states right now working toward changing statute of limitations laws to make them more just. And I think the resolution spoke very clearly that that's a good thing and a just thing.
I'm sorry, just a clarification. So I just want to clarify, are you saying that the SBC and related entities should be more proactive in those reforms, or that you support the reforms?
Well, the resolution is speaking on behalf of the messengers, saying that the efforts to make these more just is a good thing. So that's speaking the will of the messengers from the floor today.
Sure, but so the will of the messengers would also translate into some sort of call towards the ERLC, correct?
Yes. Oh, yes. And we take all of the resolutions very seriously. It informs our work in a number of ways, not only in helping us as we work in advocacy, but also with an educational aspect. So in speaking to legislators and government officials and others to say this is what the 2019 Southern Baptist Convention adopted, that's a very helpful piece in moving forward.
So you are saying that the ERLC will be more proactive in statute reforms?
Yes, we will be consistent with this resolution, absolutely.
Who else?
Yeah. Tom Strode with Baptist Press is for Dr. Woods. Did you see in the committee an overarching theme in what you were doing as a committee in resolutions, and were there one or two resolutions the committee felt especially strongly about?
Well, obviously we felt strongly about the issue on the evil of sexual abuse. As a convention, we're very much so committed to protecting those who have been preyed upon. And we're very much so committed making sure that we have structures in place to keep all of our churches as best we can held accountable to that. So that the overarching theme, I would argue, would have been protection of the unborn, as well as protection of those who could find themselves vulnerable to sexual abuse, as well as just keeping the gospel of Jesus Christ first, advancing the gospel, being concerned about the Great Commission, understanding that the Great Commission of Jesus Christ is not only that it is both, the gospel is both vertical, that it's horizontal. We're concerned about neighbor love, and it's cosmological. God will make all things new in Christ Jesus, and all things will be summed up in Christ. So that is the overarching thing. The gospel pushes us to protect and to love our neighbors well.
Who else?
Banks again, Religion News Service. I was just wondering if you might speak to the resolution related to the selective service and women, given the discussions about complementarianism during this convention, and how you see the two relating.
Yes, what we wanted to do in that resolution was, on one side, to honor those who are women who are already serving. My sister is a combat veteran, and my father is a veteran, and I myself am a veteran. Most of the individuals in my family have participated in the military, but I do believe, as the resolution stated, that we should be very careful on how we think about selective service and causing women to not have options as it relates to joining the military, or forcing women to join the military. I believe that women are the most fundamental aspect of all of creation in relationship to how God has divinely designed them. And they have been created in a wonderful way. And the Bible states in Psalm 139, as well as in 1 Peter chapter 3, that women are the weaker vessel, but that does not mean intellectually inferior. That does not mean ontologically inferior. That means that you should deal with women in a way that is precious and honorable. And so that's the spirit of that resolution, to inform our messengers that we want to protect the strength of our sisters or women.
How are we doing? Is that it? Going once, Going twice. Any closing remarks, Chairman? Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, Ed.
It occurred to me that Dr. Moore might not be at the next press conference, so since he's here, I wondered if you just would speak to the general tenor of this meeting and how you see the issues related to abuse, respecting women, and respecting people of color being all a piece in this particular convention.
I think there was a holistic theme to the convention and to the conversations, not only in the hall in the convention hall, but also in the hallways outside. And I come away from this convention deeply encouraged. I think there was a sense of weight and gravity at this convention. There was time of prayer and lament, and there also, it seems to me, was a time of concerted action. A concerted sense of action and urgency. I was told, I would have to confirm this, but I was told that just while we were presenting the Sexual Abuse Advisory Group report, that 125 churches signed up for the Caring Well Curricular Challenge right then on the spot. And so I come away deeply encouraged. I think there was a sense of unity among Baptists here this time. I think there was a sense of love for one another. I think even in the debate on the floor, I was impressed by the thoughtful and loving tone, even when people disagreed with one another. So I come away deeply encouraged, and the resolutions are a key part of that. This resolutions committee gave us a group of thoughtful, carefully thought through resolutions that Southern Baptists could speak through to speak to ourselves and to the larger world. So I come away deeply encouraged by that. I also come away deeply encouraged by some of the stories that were told here. And so there are Susan from our ERLC event on Monday night, her story that was referenced again by President Greer this afternoon stays with me and will stay with me for a lifetime. And I think many Southern Baptists heard in that story something that resonated very deeply. And the same would apply to many of the other survivor testimonies and other things that came out here. So I think the convention was well named the theme in terms of gospel above all. I think that was the general tenor of the meeting.
Robert, yes.
So we discussed this in February a little bit, but you guys have passed or empowered this credentials committee to make inquiries into churches themselves. But I think there's a broader issue, which is, church leaders who say have concealed abuses, but they did it at a church in 2005 and they're at a current church in 2009. Do you think there is any mechanism by which the SBC can look into individuals who have been proven to conceal things and act accordingly? Because I think that is a serious fear among many people who have had their abuses concealed.
Well, it certainly, of course, on one end, that would certainly be the case for law enforcement. That would be an issue for law enforcement. And in terms of the Southern Baptist Convention, that would be rooted in the responsibilities of churches. The SBC doesn't ordain individuals. Churches ordain individuals, and churches maintain ministries. So a church that, for instance, would have a minister that is unrepentantly harboring some aspect of sexual abuse would be accountable to one another in terms of the processes that we set up here.
We're gonna
We need
need
to
to
move.
draw this to a close.
Any
Our
cl-
president's come in for the next presidential press
Oh,
conference.
there he is. Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I can, sure. Yeah.
Dr. Greer?
All right, thank you.
Dr. Greer, you can sit wherever you want, but
Come
right here
sit.
in the center.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Alicia. Appreciate it. Are you sure you want me here?
I do.
Okay. I almost drank your water.
Unless you don't want.
No, I don't mind.
Couple of
Always like tag team.
Thank you to the Resolutions Committee members so much for your time to be here. I think they're celebrating that they're finished. Dr. Woods did not give any exaggeration. They met from 7:30 in the morning until after 6, 3 nights in a row, and then met again on Monday to try to get all these resolutions finished. So I appreciate their work. Also, thank you as members of the media for staying for the second presidential press conference. Typically, at the end of a in a non-election year, first year election, we do not have a presidential press conference, but in conversation with Dr. Greer and his staff, we really felt like that would be an appropriate thing for us to do this year. And Dr. Greer, thank you so much for making yourselves available to members of the media. Some seminary students are here as well. And we're going to turn it over to you for an opening statement, and after that, we'll entertain questions. I'm sorry. I'm not live yet. Okay. We are doing this as a Facebook Live and live streaming event. So, Bob, countdown. All right. We had it all set up and it was working perfectly a few minutes ago.
That's how it always does.
Yes.
We did one the other day at our church, and the moment that, I don't know how this happened, but the moment the Facebook Live thing on, I don't know what you call that little widget, but it suddenly puts like a little dunce cap on you and like a pitchfork in your hand, and I'm live talking about something in SBC with a dunce cap and a pitchfork.
Yeah.
It only lasts about 4 seconds before we got it down, but somewhere out there somebody's got it. And
Yeah. All right. We were trying to assist
that was
others
fake
not able to be
JJ.
here.
That's what it was.
But are we there? All right. Okay. Dr. Greer.
Oh, yeah. So our hope for the convention this year was just expressed in our theme, "Gospel above all," that the gospel would be what united us, what defined our identity, and what really was the substance of our mission. I believe that there were several strong statements that were made that direction. I believe the tone of the panels reflected that. I believe even the resolutions themselves. I appreciated how the Resolutions Committee tied it so much into gospel above all. In my presidential address, I said that this was a defining moment, I believe, for Southern Baptists. Not regarding our doctrine. The Baptist Faith and Message, we believe, is an accurate and faithful representation of the faith handed down once for all to the saints. But it was a defining moment in regards to what kind of witnesses we are going to be. And I believe, things are never over at the convention. That's just a 2-day meeting. But I believe that that was reinforced, and I believe that the right tone was set in some of these discussions. The sexual abuse issue, which was a large part, there were 8 different things that we said that we wanted to see happen at this year's convention, and by God's grace, all 8 of them happened. We have been trying to be very clear that this is not something to put on a list and check off and say, okay, we dealt with that in 2019. This is the beginning, or I don't want to say beginning, that's not the right word, but this is a milestone in something that will go on for the rest of our lives. It is the inculcation of certain values and the inculcation of an awareness and a way of approaching things that will not just shape 2019, but will shape future generations. And I believe it was done in pursuit of our mission. It's not done as a ploy to get new converts or to not lose converts. It's done because this is the way that the gospel, that God teaches us to be. Because the gospel teaches us to not only protect the vulnerable, but to lay down our lives for the vulnerable like God did. And we believe that the reflection of that is that we are doing everything that we can do to make our churches safe places for the vulnerable and to make them safe from abuse. So I believe that was something that was accomplished. On the mission side, I'm very excited about both Hoosier 1 and Go 2. Those weren't the only mission things talked about at this year's convention, but they certainly were prominent. Been encouraged by how our entities, our institutions have adopted those things, and that's really where the strength of this lies. You know, the president gets to preach, give an address, and gets to champion certain things, but when you really get down to it, it is the institutions that are able to carry the freight of making these things happen, because they're able to work with the local churches and the associations. So from the ERLC to the North American Mission Board to the IMB to our seminaries and our associations and conventions, I've just been very pleased at the sense of unity. I don't want to. I want to be very careful not to speak too grandiose, but I do believe, I do sense that we may look back at 2019 as a milestone in a milestone in a direction that Southern Baptists are choosing to go, and I believe it is a helpful one that says we are going to be people that are marked by an awareness, transparency, a willingness to own mistakes that have been made, and a desire to treat each other charitably, and to make the gospel be above all in how we relate to the world. So that's kind of my quick reflections on this year's convention.
Thanks, Pastor Greer. All right, we're going to get started. And just a friendly reminder, one question at a time, if we could do that. Go ahead. And state your name.
Oh, I'm sorry. Cheryl Wheeler Stewart, WBHM Public Radio and National Public Radio. What has this crisis with sexual abuse done for the reputation, or done to the reputation, of the Southern Baptist Convention, and how do you recover?
Yeah, honestly, I'm not sure how to answer that. Showed that 1 in 10 young adults or under the age of 35 have left a church because of a failure in handling this properly, or because they didn't perceive it was being handled properly. So we know it is definitely affecting us. It's obvious, but I don't really think there's any way to know. And honestly, that really hasn't been my concern. My concern is more that we do the right and faithful thing, and that if we do the right thing, then we believe God will protect our reputation as needs to be protected. I think it would just be wrong in the face of that kind of suffering and that kind of pain that's out there with victims for us to be thinking about what we look like in this. We just focus on taking care of victims and equipping pastors to make their churches safe places. Russ, anything you'd add to that?
I agree with that. I think our call is to fidelity here. We have a charge from God to faithfully be obedient to Him. And so I think what's happening now is not only what took place at the convention itself, but also there are churches in communication with one another, asking for. I passed by a group of pastors on my way into the convention hall, sharing ways that they have implemented policies and what are best practices. That's one of the things that we're doing in terms of the curriculum and the Caring Well challenge. So fidelity ought to be what we're concerned about, not our reputation.
Okay. Shannon, you haven't had a chance yet.
Shannon Baker from the Baptist Resource Network. I wanted to ask you, I noticed that Beth Moore was supposed to be on today's program with the women's panel, but she wasn't there. Can you speak to that?
Yes, Beth and I talked several times leading up to it, and Beth said, she said, you know, it appears because of the events of the last few weeks that she said, I think that my appearance, actually, let me back that up. We talked about a week when it was just getting started, and in conversation, she and I said, well, if at any point we feel like your presence there would become a distraction, meaning that it would so dominate the conversation or the temperature in the room that, not that it's not a good conversation to have, but it's just that all it would be anyone was talking about, that she would withdraw. That wasn't something I said, you need to do this. We just agreed together on that. I think she reached out about a week after that and said, you know, I just really feel like we're at that point. And I said, you know, I think that might be true. I was, sad in some ways not to have her there. She is a wonderful gospel witness, and so many, especially of our ladies, but also some of our men, have just, she has played such a crucial role in their lives, and we're grateful to have her in the Southern Baptist Convention. But I think a lot of important things were discussed on today's panel. we talked about with women. I think there was a lot of things that were not Beth Moore dependent that may have been precluded had she been there. And so I was very pleased. I was pleased with all the panels, but I was especially pleased today at the conversations that took place about what, how Southern Baptists can better make their churches empower, recognize, and position women in leadership and shaping our churches and our convention. And so I think at the end of the day, I think Beth and I would both say that was the right call, because those other things were so important that her presence, if it got in the way of that, she wouldn't have wanted that to happen.
Beth will be speaking at the ERLC National Conference in October on sexual abuse, and we're thrilled to have her. And she can show up at every panel she wants to while she's there. So I think one of the things that you'll notice here is that just walking around, Southern Baptists love Beth Moore.
Yep.
And I think that's really clear.
Russ, you said something the other day, and I hope it's okay to quote you on this because it was in a panel, so it's public.
As long as it wasn't in 2007.
That's right. So, but Russ said, a Southern Baptist convention that is not big enough for Beth Moore is not big enough for a lot of us for a lot of different reasons. So I think that's a healthy way for us to think
Well, I
about it.
also told a reporter, I said, you really are defining sometimes some of these things through an ephemeral social media sort of almost reality television lens that doesn't reflect reality. So if you asked me to get a room together of Southern Baptists who wanted to change the Baptist faith message when it comes to complementarian, I wouldn't know who to invite. And if you wanted me to get a room together of people who don't love Beth Moore, I wouldn't know how to fill that room either. And so I think that's where things are with this.
Robert Down in Houston Chronicle.
Hey, Rob.
What is the status of the inquiry into sovereign grace? If it's been ended, can you explain why, and what would you like to see done with them?
Well, one of the things that we realized in the process of this, as the executive committee worked through just some of the things that the Chronicle highlighted, is that they did not have the internal structures to be able to really kind of get into these things, and what was a healthy way of partnering with churches that respects our polity of not being, in control of the churches, but also able to hold them accountable. And so rather than continuing to take these cases and say we're clearing or not clearing, no formal charge had been brought on the floor of the convention to disfellowship any of those churches. And so if a formal charge had been brought, then that's when it requires something. So in this process, they realized they did not have the internal things to do that as this new credentials committee is formed, and as it spends I would imagine its first few meetings are going to be about the process. And my hope, my instruction to them, my encouragement to them, I'm not in control of them, but my instruction to them has been that they work very closely with the Sexual Abuse Advisory Group to find what is the right way to guide churches. What are times where we have to have this is what it means to show the right posture towards sexual abuse, and then I think they'll begin to take up various cases that are brought to it when somebody raises an inquiry about a church. So there's been no official thing. They haven't been the bylaws work group issued a clearing of those churches. They ceased doing that, and they haven't. That there's been no change in status.
So, would you like to see those 10 churches that you initially named see some sort of inquiry at a later date?
Well, they're all over the map. It'd be hard to speak about all 10 of them in a group. But, one of them was not even Southern Baptist, and one of them was withdrawn, and others. And some of them have taken some very positive steps. I think as this group gets in place and is formed, I believe there will be other churches that are brought. And so, at that point, then I think they will extend the invitation. One of the things we really hope to see here is it to be easy, especially for victims, to be able to raise questions. One of the problems in the culture of Southern Baptists has been that you got a victim that wants to step forward, and is it the right welcoming environment? And I think the Credentials Committee would want to reflect that as well.
2 more questions. Adele, you say? No, just one. One.
Adele's going to take them both. Can I ask real quick before Adele does that? Anything that you want to add to what I just said there? Okay.
Oh, you weren't going to say anything more?
No.
Okay. Could you speak to the overall tenor of the meeting related to not just discussing abuse, but discussing respect for women and possible roles for women, and also roles for people of color? Just can you speak to how the convention dealt with all of those things and why that was something you wanted it to do?
Yeah,
If it did.
I was very encouraged. I mean, you've obviously got a large group of people, and there's some diversity in it, and it's easy to kind of lock in on some of those, moments or comments from the floor or some reaction. But the vast tenor was overwhelmingly supportive of just the feedback in the panels, the mood in the room. The way the resolutions passed, the overwhelming nature of them. I believe on those three issues: the gospel being above all, our posture toward women in the body of Christ and the role they play, and on the racial reconciliation. Most of the people that I have talked to, and especially the race and the women, have just been very, very positive and encouraging on that. I spent some time with a group of ladies last night, a large group of ladies, and that was what they said. They were like, we're so more encouraged than we ever have been. Even some things like the worship. I had an African-American brother come up to me and said, I've been a part of this convention for, I don't know, he said a long time, 15, 20 years. He said, I got very emotional in the second song in the worship set. He said, because I thought for the first time, I feel like I belong here. And I think that mood was reflected not just in the worship, but the leadership on the stage, the appointments in the committees, the resolutions, the discussion on that. We're not where we need to be on those things, but I believe a signal has been sent that we believe that's where we need to go. And I've found that people are pretty willing to grow with you and put up, with some of the difficulty and the mess if they know what your intentions are and where you're going to go. Now it's on us to take the right steps at the right time and to move in a way that shows that this is not words or virtue signaling, but it's something that we mean because we believe the Bible teaches it. Russ, anything you'd add?
I'd like to commend JD for the intentional diversity that he sought and maintained in committee appointments. And on the Committee on Committees, many women appointed the Committee on Committees, the Committee on Resolutions. If you think about the way that committee led our convention, Curtis Woods and others on that convention, I think this was a very, very positive step in the right direction.
And our final question is with?
I'm Travis France. I'm with the Alabama Baptist. My question is, you, in the resolution and in your address, stated about the possibility of pastors and others going from church to church. How do you see a way of curtailing that? Maybe a partnership with law enforcement, or how would you handle that situation?
Yeah, and Russ, I'd love to know your thoughts here too, or I'd love for you to share your thoughts. But that's one of the things that we, the Sexual Abuse Advisory Group, and this new Credentials Committee it's one of the things it wants to consider. Because, I even mentioned in my report today that they are, I can't remember the exact language, but it was, they want to look at all solutions, legislative solutions, investigate the questions of a database, and just consider everything and say, hey, what are ways that we can not just kind of pull back and say, every church is on its own. Efforts in education, efforts in ease of things, more local association partnerships. That's a big theme, is that we know a lot of this accountability happens locally, and so changing the culture will change a lot of that. But also, what are some of these tools? Like I said, these other things. We're just going to investigate them. That's something that we want to make sure we think about thoroughly and use every possible solution that would better get us to that goal.
Will that be discussed maybe in the next convention next year?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would hope that the Credentials Committee is going to make a lot of progress between now and then, and I'm sure there'll be a number of things that are good to report.
Yes, and one of the pieces of that, of course, even before we get to whatever next steps are taken, would be reporting. Having churches that are reporting allegations of sexual abuse to the civil authorities right away. That's why that's a major component of the curriculum of the Caring Well Challenge, demonstrating to churches how to report, when to report, the necessity of this. That's a key piece of this going forward.
I know you said one more question, but I saw us skip Sarah back there a minute ago.
Yeah.
Could we, is that okay with you?
Yes, absolutely,
Okay,
yes.
all right. Sarah, you want to get?
Yes.
Hey, thanks. Sarah Pulliam Bailey from the Washington Post. You may or not know or care, but the Catholic bishops are meeting in Baltimore this week having the same conversation about clergy sex abuse. I was wondering if you are taking any cues from what the Catholic Church has done on the issue, whether you've talked to any leaders there, any experts, and how you would compare the two situations.
We certainly care. Yeah, absolutely. And we certainly are closely watching to see, what things that are done that are helpful and what things that are not. I mean, in some ways, that's a hard story to watch unfold. And so I'm grateful for this meeting and praying that great things will come out of it because of the safety needs of, the largest religious body in the United States is still going to be the Catholic Church. And that represents a lot of young boys and girls and people there. So we're certainly watching. Russ, you may know even more about that meeting.
It's in everybody's interest for the Catholic bishops to get this right. And not only that, for the Catholic Church globally to get this right. We should all be praying for that for all of us. I think one of the things that has developed over the last year is I would often hear when I would raise this in evangelical circles an attitude that church sexual abuse happens, but it's only a Catholic problem. I do not find that attitude among evangelicals right now, and I think that's a welcome development to see that there's no section of religious life or secular life or any other place that's invulnerable to predation. So we ought to be hoping that the Catholic Church will act in a just way on these things, and so my prayers are for them on that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming and giving of your time. We're going to ask that you allow Dr. Greer and Dr. Moore to go ahead and exit before you try to catch them en route. We've done the press conference. Ask them to go on out, Todd and others, if you can help them get to their way. Thank you all so much for your presence here today. As soon as they are out, this press conference is formally concluded. Thank you.